So, thank you, John, and appreciate you and the whole AABDC team for what you do for our professional community. Good evening, everyone. It's so wonderful to be with all of you here tonight. This is actually my first in-person speaking engagement since the middle of March last year, and I could not think of a better audience to be with than the top 50 outstanding Asians, okay? All right, so it is, it's really hard to believe that it's been a year and a half since the global pandemic was declared by the World Health Organization. It feels like much longer than 18 months to me. I'm sure it does to many of you as well. I'd like to say first, thank you to all of the first responders out there, our frontline essential workers, whether you're in the military, healthcare, food service, education, or provide any essential service. Thank you so much for all you do and for your support of all of us. So, every person in every country all around the world has been impacted by the pandemic in some way. And those of you who have lost loved ones, whether they're family, friends, or colleagues, my heart goes out to you. We've been under incredible duress as a country, as a community, and as individuals. We've experienced numerous crises simultaneously. In addition to the pandemic and the economic and social pressures which it's triggered, lives have been negatively impacted and lost because of other reasons. Systemic racism and social injustice have catapulted to the forefront of society, and as a country, we are experiencing an awakening, and in many ways, a reckoning. What has become abundantly clear is that we are all connected. In fact, one of the biggest revelations I think that we've had through the pandemic is that there is nothing more important, nothing more powerful than the power of the human connection. Would you guys agree with me? Yeah? Okay. So, one of the things that I say, because I mean this wholeheartedly, is that I wish at the beginning of the pandemic we didn't coin this term social distancing. It's total crap, isn't it, right? Why? Because in actuality, we meant physical distancing. We need social connection more than anything, and that's something that we absolutely learned together. And in fact, without the ability to get together, shake hands, hug, kiss, pat someone on the back, the need to create connection was even more amplified. Thankfully, due to technology, and I promise I won't try to sell any of you guys anything tonight. Thanks to all the AT&T customers out there, by the way. Okay, right? Okay, we have figured out how to make it work, all right? But I would suggest that it's the role of leaders to develop and strengthen those connections. After all, isn't leadership all about people? Okay, so let's talk about our people, all right? There is still so much work to do. Let's talk about our Asian American community. We're the fastest growing racial and ethnic group, representing more than 23 million people. We make up about 7% of the nation's population and are projected to surpass 46 million by the year 2060. One of my little facts about 2060, by the way, because it's going to be a great year, is that by the year 2060, women of color, all the women out there, will represent the majority of all women in this country, okay? That's right. Okay, and our buying power, I know all of you guys will love this. Our buying power, because that's important, yeah? Okay, our buying power as a whole is significant, about $1.3 trillion, right? And in fact, if we, Asian Americans, were our own country, we would rank about 15th in the world's largest economies, bigger than the GDP of Mexico, or the Netherlands, or Saudi Arabia, okay? We are, and this is why organizations like AT&T are so important, we're 13% of the professional workforce, but only 6% of executive posts. So, have things gotten better for us? Have they gotten easier? In some ways, yes, and in some ways, no. COVID has been really hard on our communities. There's never been a time in history when courageous leadership is needed. Courageous leadership is needed in every industry, across every profession, across the private sector, public sector, nonprofits. Each one of you here is a leader. Whether you're an awardee, ally, supporter, leadership is a choice. It is not a title or a particular position. Each one of us chooses to be a leader. And the power in this room, represented by this collective audience, is amazing. Not only because of your achievements and accolades, but because of the impact that each of you are having, whether it's in your company, in the marketplace, or across our community. So, what's it take to be a courageous leader? According to an article published by Harvard Business Review, as an aside, I'm Asian, I had to mention Harvard in there, right? Okay. By the way, I didn't go there. Shout out to my Cornell friends. Woo! Look at that. Nothing like being a Cornell alum in New York, right? Okay. All right. So there are 5 characteristics of a courageous leader. You've got to be authentic. You've got to be resilient. You've got to have emotional intelligence. You've got to have self-discipline. And you've got to have a commitment to purpose. I'd like to add 2 more nuances to this list, which actually fall into that category of emotional intelligence. First is empathy, the second is vulnerability. So what is empathy? Empathy is more than sympathy. It's more than compassion. It's all about a deeper understanding of someone else's thoughts, feelings, and experiences, putting yourself in their shoes. Courageous leaders are empathetic leaders. And one of my favorite sayings, which embodies this, is that crisis does not develop great leaders, it reveals them. Courageous leaders are also vulnerable. And contrary to popular belief, vulnerability does not mean weakness. Does that surprise you? After all, courage does not mean that you don't have fear or you don't have doubt. Courage is all about demonstrating strength and moving forward in the face of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And that means that courageous leaders lead with vulnerability, which also helps affirm their authenticity, by the way. So it's in this spirit that I'd like to try to lead by example. Back in March, when the murders of 8 people, including 6 Asian women in Atlanta, occurred, it triggered a new wave of protests across our country to stop AAPI hate. The mix of emotions that I felt was indescribable. I wanted to say something. I wanted to do something. So I felt compelled to try to put it into words. I'd like to read you something that I wrote back then, earlier this year, which I posted on my company's site as well as on LinkedIn. Hope, promise, possibility. These are the reasons my parents chose to immigrate to the United States in the 1960s. I'm a proud second-generation American. While many people know this about me, many don't know what it feels like, especially during times like these. Growing up, I struggled to fit in. I felt not fully Asian, not fully American. Generational, cultural, and language gaps persisted throughout my childhood. There were times that I felt afraid, that I felt like I might not belong. I had countless instances of being bullied, being called inappropriate names, and being constantly reminded that I was different, fed this fear, and most certainly shook my confidence, causing me at times to question my identity. You might think that my experiences are limited to childhood. Unfortunately, and I'm sure this is familiar to many of you, they are not. To this day, it's not surprising to me, although it is totally disappointing, to be asked, where are you really from? Right? Or to be told, go back to your own country. And in certain settings, the derogatory name-calling and unseemly jokes from my youth are repeated, even now. Flippant comments like, all Asians look the same, or how you can speak really well, Anne, still arise. And as an Asian female, and I know the ladies out here will be able to relate to this, living at the intersection of racism and sexism, being passed over for louder voices, and too often being stereotyped as subservient has simply and sadly become part of life. I don't share these things to complain. Rather, I share them as a small sampling of realities that many of us face, which exist. And in these realities, the assertion to those of us who have experienced them is that we do not belong, that we can be objectified, that we won't make waves or fight back, that we are the perpetual foreigner, the silent outsider, and somehow lesser than. By now, we have all seen the horrific stats, which clearly demonstrate that over the past year, things have gotten worse for the AAPI community, and in particular women. The nature of hate incidents, including verbal harassment, physical assault, workplace discrimination, refusal of service, and online harassment perpetuate. And as we've seen in the recent tragic shooting spree in Atlanta, the ongoing street assaults of our elderly, lives have been lost. Many of my friends are afraid, not only for their elders, but for themselves and for their children. Concerns spread well beyond the AAPI community, as they should. On Friday, March 26th, there was a National Day of Action and Healing. The date is significant because it marks the anniversary of the Nationalization Act of 1790, which restricted US citizenship by naturalization to white immigrants. Did you know that this barrier was not removed for all Asians until 1952? Fast forward to present time. In support of Stop Asian Hate, I am proud to see numerous companies, many of them represented here, organizations and groups spanning the public, private, and nonprofit sectors, including their leaders, they're choosing to lean in with their support. This is not a moment, it's a movement. And yes, there is hope, promise, and possibility. So several people have asked me if I'm fearful now. I am not. I'm angry, admittedly infuriated at times. I'm frustrated. I'm saddened by the continuous senseless loss of life. I'm disappointed because I know that we can be better, that we should do better. But the issues run deep with roots in our history. Anti-Asian sentiment and hate are not new. Did you know that the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 was the first, and to this date remains the only law implemented, which prevented all members from a specific ethnic group from immigrating to the United States? Did you know that during World War II, the internment of Japanese Americans forced the relocation and incarceration of over 110,000 people in concentration camps? And did you know that in the days following 9/11, there was a spike in violence against those who looked South and West Asian, and that ever since, anti-Muslim hate crimes have never dropped below pre-9/11 levels? So perhaps there are some out there that believe that this is ancient history, and the incidents of today are corner cases. Well, unfortunately, that's not true. Would it surprise you that in 2019, well before COVID changed the world, over 75% of Asian Americans experienced discrimination in some way? This next one makes me really sad. And that over 55% of Asian American children report being bullied in school, higher than any other ethnic group. Hate crimes, really ugly words, aren't they? They're crimes committed either partially or solely based on one's prejudices and biases against another, simply because of their race, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, culture, disability, religion, age, or otherwise. No one should have to live in fear simply because of who they are. Regrettably, systemic racism and social injustices exist. This fuels continued inequalities, discrimination, prejudice, stereotyping, and much worse. Unfortunately, this results in the opposite of what this country embodies, and is entirely contrary to the foundational diversity which has formed the United States of America. Think about it. Becoming American is not about a particular nationality, ethnicity, religion, language, or political party. It is about being part of one beautifully diverse nation. Being American embodies life, liberty, equality, opportunity, rights, and yes, justice for all. Who are we to question another person's identity or judge someone based on how they look or how they speak? Who are we to challenge whether someone else belongs through acts of malice, blame, anger, jealousy, and hate? We are better than this. We must be more evolved. The beauty of our humanity lies in our diversity. We all belong, every single one of us. Each and every voice matters, and we should not be afraid to be heard. We must stand united against racism. We must work to educate ourselves and help educate others. We must consider the expansion of civil rights protections. Whether a hate incident or a hate crime, it must stop. There is no room for hate in our vocabulary. The power of our words must be married with the power of our actions. And we must expand our perspectives to understand the intersectionality of all the issues faced by all marginalized communities. What we do today will shape generations to come. It's time to listen. It's time to seek to understand. It's time to engage and take action. It's time to be better and to do better together. So together, let's be the change. Let's ensure hope, promise, and possibility for all. So it is time, and in closing, I'd like to say that it is time for courageous leadership. I'm asking all of you to join me to lean in across your teams, your organizations, your communities, your families. Let's unite together. I'm so glad that we're in this together, because together we are stronger and we will be better. Let us ensure together that progress is made across all of our professional communities, I would argue also all of our personal communities. And together, there's no question that tomorrow will continue to be even better than today. Thank you, everyone.